Fellow auto detailers, welcome to the show that features interviews with today's most successful auto detailers. This is the Auto Detailing Podcast. Here's your host, Jimbo Balaam.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 261 of the Auto Detailing Podcast. And as promised in episode 260, which was that I had a big announcement to make. Now, unfortunately, there were some things that happened outside of my control, and just as we started to talk about this idea, just so many factors came up that I wasn't able to do the full release like I had originally planned to give to you. But with that said, I learned an important lesson that I shouldn't tell you that I'm going to make announcements when I don't have the announcements fully ready, even though I did have it fully ready and whatever. So but I want to, for those of you that may be interested in additional offerings that I may have, which is what this announcement was going to be, is about an additional offering that I may have. What I'm going to have you do, and I realize that only the core audience is going to do this, and this is totally fine. But if you go to autodetailingpodcast.com, at the left side, if you just scroll down a little bit, where it says previous podcast episodes, right to the left of that, it says join our mailing list. What I want you to do is enter your name and your email address. And what I'm going to do from here on out is any announcements that I have are going to be going directly through that. So I'm going to be emailing you guys versus talking about it on the podcast, because as you know, these podcasts are listened to all time. So years from now, months from now, weeks from now, days from now, and any offerings that I may have currently may not be available in a month, 6 months, a year, 10 years, whatever down the road. So if you're interested in additional offerings that I may be having coming up, and just as a hint, there are additional offerings that I'm working on right now. I just had some moving parts move and some things and some people drop out that I wasn't expecting. But if you're still interested or may be interested in something like that, just put in your name and email, and that'll kick you onto my email list, and then we will communicate through that medium instead of me talking about it and then waiting on a response. So there's that. Again, want to thank the Better Software Company for powering this episode of the podcast. And now you guys are going to get a treat, another episode from myself and Barry Theal. Now, I will admit the audio was a little choppy. We tried to fix it a couple times. I had the internet go out while I was recording it, and it's just been one of those days. So sometimes with technology, you can't control all aspects of it, and that was what was going on. But there's some very valuable information in here that Barry gives, and it's a great episode. We talk a lot about coatings in the end. We talk about how he sold Americana Global, but how he's still kind of in it. So it's a great episode with Barry. I hope you guys enjoy it. Again, bear with me on the audio. It's not 100%, but the content given by Barry is 130%. So hopefully that makes up for the difference there. And again, if you want to sign up to my mailing list to get the behind-the-scenes sneak peek of how I can really communicate with you guys, go ahead and do that at autodetailingpodcast.com. In fact, go to autodetailingpodcast.com. It's on the left sidebar there, right to your left. I appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoy this episode with Barry Theal. All right, welcome to episode 261 of the Auto Detailing Podcast, and today I brought back on Barry Theal. So Barry, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jimbo. I appreciate that, man.
There was so much good feedback about the previous episode, and I should have looked it up before we started recording what episode that was. It wasn't very long ago at all, but there was just some incredible feedback on that episode, so I think you knocked it out of the park on that one.
Thanks, man. I feel that it was just the, staying honest with these people and skipping all the hype and, the things we could do. But I think that's what did it. I had a tremendous amount of positive feedback. And actually just yesterday, Jimbo, it was funny. I was driving home and I get this text message from a guy and he says, "Hey, I finally listened to your podcast. It was pretty good." Because I enjoyed it. And that was, here we are doing the next one already. So people are still listening. says a lot about you and the brand, which is huge.
I'm glad
and I'm thankful to be a part of it.
No, and the show is all about showcasing, guys like yourself. So I'm sure we could do a kissing match all day, back and forth, and I appreciate those words, and I know you do too. But last time you were on, we were talking about Americana Global, your company, or your former company now. And so you were talking about how you were becoming a pad company, and now you've actually sold the company. So I wanted to touch on that, talk about that, maybe, and obviously talk about as much or as little as you can or cannot, but tell us why the reason to sell, and what that kind of looks like for you now, not having to have that company and run that as well as all your detailing stuff.
Well, it happened really fast for me. And I'm at the point in my life where, like I said before, it's about the dollar sometimes. And this is what it was about this time. There's no doubt about it. I got lucky. Obviously there was some knowledge and a little things in place to breed those pads for Americana Global, the EC pads, the exact fit pads.
You're cutting in and out just a little bit. Is there any way you can move to a different spot, maybe? Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, all right. So anyway, I came out with these. It's funny, I was just thinking, can you hear me better now? I'm thinking of that Verizon guy who just switched to Sprint and said, don't pay extra for 1%. I was just laughing about that in the back of my mind.
That is funny.
Really weird, Can you hear me now? It's amazing how those words got branded.
I know.
Anyway, long story short, so it happened quick. I think our last conversation, I was getting ready to introduce the microfiber pad through Americana, I believe. Well, with the launch of that pad, and then that pad, obviously, at the time we hit the market, I think, right at a good point, because there was nothing really new in the microfiber system as far as anybody come out with anything at that moment. Literally right after SEMA, a couple people released some stuff. I think that was a smart move on our behalf. Obviously against played with the timing, but it was a smart move. And, that hit, Americana really took off. And I say this not as a large person, like a large company, but as a smaller company. We noticed a major gains in the last several months as far as the pad sales and things like that. So it was, to be honest, it was getting a little hectic. There were obviously 4 partners involved. I decided, along with another partner out here who's close to me, Scott Ward, we decided to see if we could sell it. And the end peaked from the 2 other partners. So the Americana, was originally started as Americana Car Care, and then went to Americana Global after a partial sale, then turned it into me selling the entire company. And it was an interesting sale because we took a lump sum of cash, obviously, and then on top of that, it's got residuals, pads coming. So basically, I'm still kind of a part of the company because in that deal, I'm the only one that can design pads for Americana Global, obviously. So I'll still actually be working with Americana Global design pads in the future, and I've got a couple that are getting ready to be released that I'm not allowed to talk about, obviously. I could, but so I thought to myself, at the end of the day, we're in business to make money, and if I can make money without doing anything, why not? So why not take a residual and just move on to maybe another project or something different? I have some ideas. They're not fully 100% yet. Don't want to, really bring those up. But at the end of the day, it was just, you know what? Let's walk away. I had a good opportunity. I think I jumped on it, and it has allowed me to open other doors. And I think that was the major decision in that whole thing. You take a lump sum, you're getting paid for 3 years. And virtually, honestly, you're not really doing nothing. At the end of the day, you can't really get better than that, if that makes sense.
No, it actually sounds great.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, it was good for everybody, and that's why I did. I really, really care about that brand, obviously, and I always will. There's always going to be a place for that brand in my heart. And when you look at the two guys who now own it, Matt Kelly and Peter Dybich, both of us are Ceramic Pro. I look at these two guys, and their marketing is genius. They've done a lot for Ceramic Pro in just the 2 short years they've been here.
I'm still getting you cutting it in a little bit.
Okay, hold on here. Anyway, so Peter Dybich and Matt Kelly have done a lot with the Ceramic Pro brand over the last 2 years. So I seen this, and I with them being a part of Americana Global, then now the transaction to where they own Americana Global, it'll be a good thing. I think it was for the best interest of the brand that, they take it, they run with it, and they get real crazy with it, and they're going to do what they do. Obviously I'm still in the back end of the scenes. I don't work for the company. I have no ownership in the company. I just have a commitment to them that says, hey, keep designing pads and we'll keep selling pads. So at the end of the day, why not?
For sure. Was it them? Sorry, was it them that came to you with the idea of buying you out, or because it sounds like you kept saying it was moving so fast, So was selling the company even on your radar at all? Like, was that something that you maybe eventually wanted to do, but you didn't expect it to come this fast, or did they kind of just come to you, not out of the blue, but kind of out of the blue, and like, hey, would you be interested in selling, or how did that work?
Man, it's weird how it worked, to be honest, because it wasn't expected. I had no plans whatsoever of selling it. And there were no talks about it either coming into the sale. It started as a joke and an idea, if that makes sense. Like, a couple guys sitting at the bar having a few drinks, and they said, hey, let's, something like that. And that's kind of how it aroused. It was quick. It was very quick. It started, and we were trying to figure out how to do it, how it was beneficial for everybody. And we literally had a phone call, and I was like, you know what? Actually, this will work. So I called Peter back, and I was talking to Peter, and Peter's a great guy. For those who don't know Peter, he's an outstanding individual. He's not a detailer, just a good businessman. And he's learning the coating market in the U.S. market as far as people and products and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, he's really good with books and numbers. He knows how to build a company. And I said, let's do this. How about you give me a lump sum, and then you pay for every ad you order, and I walk away. Now you have all the profits. Because it was tough, because on a small company, we had 4 owners. So nobody was really... We were starting to make money, but it would take a whole lot to make a lot of money. To build that empire is massive. Even like if you take a company like AutoGeek, who's probably one of the biggest companies in the detailing world, and you split 4 owners into there, it's still, each owner's not making a lot at the end of the day after everything's said and done. And that's kind of what it boiled down to. And I thought, if I can walk away and collect residual doing nothing, in the end I'll probably still be making more than I would if I owned the company, put in all the hard work, the hours, the time, the sweat, the messages on Facebook, and all that stuff. So it made sense. I called Peter back. I said, Peter, listen, here's the deal. Let's do this. How about and I gave him a fair offer. And he's like, do you know what? That's perfect. You still make money. We make money. We can bring the brand. It takes some headaches and stress off you, and we can do what we want. So it really worked. I think, truthfully, in the end, for the brand itself, that was the best interest for the brand, And to build something and kind of walk away like that is it was difficult, you know. It really was. I mean, it was like walking away from a small family. But at the end, in the end, when it's all said and done, what's best for the brand was them two running, owning, and operating the brand, and me designing for the brand. So that's kind of how it happened. And it happened real quick, overnight, literally. Within like 4 or 5 days, we had everything worked out in 2 weeks. And that was it, really. I mean, the first part of the brand was counting all the inventory and saying, okay, there's inventory you have, thank you. But other than that, it went really smooth. It was a good transaction. And I really believe that Peter and Matt will do a fantastic job at doing what they do to not only keep the brand, but to expand. They have some incredible ideas. And it should be interesting to see how in the next year or so how it plays out. I have a feeling they're going to be very successful with it. And
it sounds like it'll complement.
Really.
Yeah, it sounds like it's actually a good strategic plan on their end of kind of complementing the coating brand or their distributorship and kind of buffering that just in case for some weird reason that would go away one day. They have this other, reliable source of income too.
Yeah, and it truthfully, that's all it was. And I when you talked about that, like the brands will complement each other. You have Ceramic Pro, you have Americana Global. Obviously, Ceramic Pro will be all coatings. Americana Global will, is obviously pads and the pad company. I can't really discuss all their ideas, but I mean, I think it's pretty evident and pretty fair to say that they're going to expand outside the pad, do some pretty big things with the brand. The brand's still relatively new. It's still years. And so they've got a lot of work ahead of them. No doubt about it. But at the same time, it's an established brand. It's a great brand. And it's going to be a big brand eventually. I won't be a part of it at that point, but it'll be nice to know something started to see it moved on to big things. And that's what I'm hoping for. I wish them all the success they can handle and then some. That's from one business owner to the next. But at the end of the day, I had some other ideas and some things I want to do now. And it's really that simple. So why not, why not enjoy life and see what else comes up next?
Heck yeah.
I don't know.
Heck yeah. That makes total sense. And I think you're smart in that, and that I was, when you told me you sold it, I was a little caught off guard, but now that I hear the story play out, it's like, I'm a huge fan of that. Of just like, for one, I love how quickly things moved because I'm a big fan of moving extremely quickly. I guess it would be a fire, shoot, aim kind of deal versus a fire, aim, or mess that one up big time. Other than a aim, shoot, whatever. I messed that up. Anyway, point being, I'm glad that it worked out for you. That was a huge brain fart.
No,
so.
you know what? It did. It worked out for everybody. And that's, that was the key to it. At the end of the day, now there's 2 owners instead of 4. Scott, and, I've talked about Scott Ford in previous, Scott being my right-hand man, and I've given him some ownership in some of the companies. Now we're partners in some of the stuff. Don't think for 1 second that for the last year I haven't thought about doing other things.
Sure.
Even one of them guys I can never sit still. I always got to keep moving. My head's always spinning with new ideas, new thoughts, new processes, things like that. My mind never sleeps. And for the last year, we brought something, we've been thinking and trying to figure out how to do this or that or whatever. And with the sale of Americana, it's allowed us to now really, really, really begin to execute a plan instead of just, aim, fire, shoot, as you would say.
There you go. You got it.
Now we're going to sit back and just, prepare for battle, I guess.
Yeah, that would be an. I got it. It would be an aim. It would be an aim. Gosh, I had it and then I lost it. Ready, aim, fire. I guess versus a ready, fire, aim. Gosh, that I totally messed that one up. But yeah, you're gonna strategize a little bit more and come up with a game plan for your next adventure.
Yeah, whatever that adventure is.
Sure.
They're out there. There's multiple adventures out there.
It's almost overwhelming. I was telling my family the other day, it's almost overwhelming how much opportunities out there and how much you can. It's just like it's almost paralyzing to think how much opportunities out there versus like people get all hung up of like, what should I do? And it's like, well, do freaking anything, and that'll lead you into the next thing if you really don't know,
Yeah, exactly. And, that's kind of how my life has always been. I'm very spontaneous, acting and thing, which really sucks at times, and other times it's good. I've built my business on that, act and then think, so I never really think of the consequences, which is not good. But at the same time, I've been successful with that philosophy, just waking up and doing something. But the next adventure will be really thought out and really done with precision before anything's done. That's for sure. But that's it, really.
You know what? I think the connection may be bad on my end. What I'm going to do, I want to get into talking about coatings. I'm going to hang up and call you right back.
All right.
Okay,
Actually, look, I got like 5 bars here.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway,
it must have been. It was just getting too choppy, and I didn't want to make it be super annoying to listen to. So, interesting that you would sell Americana Global to a coating company, because that was the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you told me that you have a lot of knowledge about coatings and a lot of stuff that would help other guys out about coatings. And I still think, even though a lot of good information and more time is going by, so guys are getting more information about coatings, I still think there's a big unknown out there, and a lot of unknowns, actually. So let's talk about coatings and give us the rundown on them, what you see, what you know about coatings, what guys should maybe watch out for, how to sell coatings, all that. And if you want to get controversial, that's the name of the game. I love it.
I think anything associated with Barry Field and detailing was controversial.
Well, I welcome it.
So I really am a firm believer in that. For some reason, I don't know why, but that's how it always ends up.
Because you're honest. Because you like being honest.
I guess. Yeah. Coating, where to start? I mean, I'm not going to wear too much next year, which could be dangerous. At the end of the day, okay, you have a form of protection on a car, or as, again, I say, Mike Phillips always said, LSP, last step protection. It's huge for me, but coatings aren't overrated. They're here. They're for real. I believe they're the future, I believe eventually the only thing that should get waxed will be like a vintage car, something like you're preserving history. Like I would never vote, for example. I have what do I have in the shop to give you an idea? I'm working on a Lola race car with a Porsche motor. Literally, it's an open-wheeled race car that was from the 70s. It's got a Porsche motor in it, that car, it's single stage paint, blah, 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 all the whole historical stuff. Something like that, I personally would not want to coat. Well, anything single stage paint, really, I wouldn't want to coat. Here's why. If you ever coated single stage paint, you've got these older lockers, and I think of the philosophy of solvent versus lacquer, Basically, they're both derived from the same plant or same tree or whatever. The same complex of whatever, scientific stuff. It's pretty much the same stuff. One's just stronger, has a quicker flash time. The other one's a little softer, and, it lasts longer. Obviously, a couple of little ingredients, but at the end of the day, they're all going to color. They're all going to thin some paint out. Little things. They're going to help remove glue, blah, 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 blah. But when I look at that, like that family of chemicals, solvents, lacquers, reducers, and you think about a coating which is made of a lot of solvent. One of the active ingredients in most coatings is a product called alkoxylane, which is a solvent. So when I see single-stage paint and I see guys coating single-stage paint, and you get the transfer. We don't know the buffing transfer that you get. You get the color, you get the red. When you apply a coating to single-stage paint, you get this transfer. Now you have transfer of paint on the applicator, plus you have coating, and then you have a solvent, in that coating. To me, it just doesn't seem like, without necessarily saying it, it just doesn't make sense to me at the end of the day. From, like, how do I get this? How can I say it the right way without
the protection's almost not able to
not
lay
there.
on the surface.
Yeah.
It's almost mixing
Correct.
with the paint itself instead of creating that protective barrier on top of the paint. Is that what you're trying to say?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct.
Got it.
But then you're going to have, and then on the flip side, you're going to have people say, oh, well, what about or like clear coat? Clear coat, you should get that, that too. Yeah, you do. I assume on microscopic level you do, but it doesn't, seems like on the old black stage paint, and I've played with it, and I take a coating across the paints, it just doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do in the back of my mind.
Mm.
I think of coatings is not the end-all, be-all, obviously, but colors you don't really care about. So, and how can I say this? Okay, a guy today, a guy like me, I go out and I buy my wife a Jeep. Okay, that's it's just a Jeep at the end of the day. Even if it's a $150,000 Jeep or a $10,000 Jeep, whatever, it's a Jeep. It's never going to have historical significance because it's mass-produced. It's going to get driven daily. It's going to be, and that to me is what you should be coating in my eyes. As a daily driver. And then you have a Ferrari. Okay, for example, let's just a 458. It's common Ferrari. Well, if you can actually say that. But in today's world, it's 458, and eventually it's going to be like another 360. 20 years from now that some guy is going to be able to afford to buy, it's 50 grand or 60 grand. So again, it's just another Ferrari, Now let's talk about something like a Ferrari, which is a Ferrari supercar. That's something I wouldn't go with, just because that car is going to be preserved for history. And truthfully, at the end of the day, whether or not as a detailer, we all sell these coatings. We all say, hey, these are 3-year, 5-year, 1-year lifetime is out there, depending on what manufacturer. Truthfully, we're, 10 years now into this. And have we seen failures? Absolutely. Are the installers failing it? Probably. Is the coating failing? Probably. Probably a little bit of both. You know what I mean? But how do we know we're not doing harm to the paint, if that makes sense?
It does.
At the end of the day,
you're saying not, and I would, by the way, completely agree with you on this, and I've never really heard anyone explain it, and that's why I asked you the question why you wouldn't put a coating on a collection piece, or not necessarily a high value car, because a Jeep could be a high value car to someone. So, but maybe a collection piece or a museum piece or something that you're trying to preserve for a long time, because we don't necessarily know if there are any adverse effects to the paint surface with a coating on it. So do it on a car that honestly the person's probably not going to have in 5 or 10 years versus the car that you want to have original paint in 40 years.
Correct. Yeah, and
that's totally fair.
That, to me,
yeah,
and and it's not. And how I say this as a guy that sold a lot of coatings. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I still often worry: are these coatings legit? At the end of the day, we're selling 5-year, 10-year coatings, and I've seen coatings go 5 years personally myself. I've never seen them go 10 years, obviously, because 10 years was 2006.
Right.
I've never seen coating go my lifetime, because
Right.
they haven't been in my lifetime. And what generates a lifetime of protection?
Mm.
You know, and that's what worries me at the end of the day. You know, I think they will hold up, and I think obviously there's people who are way smarter than I am on the scientific side.
Sure.
Coatings have been around in Asia and Europe a lot longer than here. But again, me personally, I haven't been to Asia to see a coating that holds up for 10 years.
Right.
You know, or a lot of time, you know. I mean, if coatings were out since the 80s and, you know, the lifetime coatings are still there, that's pretty impressive. But at this point, realistically, to give a real number, I think, you know, coatings evolved. I think Optimum was the first one here. And, you know, I think Optimum's probably pushing 10 years now. I could be completely wrong with that. But
No, I think you're right.
Closest
Yeah.
to be pushed 10 years. But back then, Optimum said we have a permanent coating.
Mm.
You know, let's just say in 2006, they said, hey, we have a permanent coating. Well, since 2006, I think Optimum has switched formulas 5 or 6 times.
Mm.
Why? In 2006, it had a perfect coating. Why was the coating switched?
Right.
You know, that, you know, and and Optimum's a great company. I installed their products. You know, I don't mean that to be any way bad or anything.
No, you're just using it as an example, because I'm sure and not to bash Optimum at all, because probably companies will switch their formulations and not even tell anyone. So, and just start sending out new ones.
Know?
So if Optimum's actually come out, and I don't know if you would probably know better than I if they've changed the formulas, but at least, and maybe they don't come out and say that and you just happen to know, but it'd be better for them to be honest about it, or any company, than just switch the formula and not say anything, because obviously technology is constantly getting better.
Yeah, exactly. And we're constantly moving and evolving. You know, but when you, and I say this with one of the guys, another guy I highly respect in this industry, is David Doozy. If I said that right, Dr. D from Optimum.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever had a chance to sit down with him and talk to him, he's one of the smartest guys you'd ever meet from a scientific side of detailing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that with the utmost respect for them. I really do, you know. I think Optimum has a great team. But again, I was just using them as an example.
Sure.
Another company like Ramaco, who has a lifetime warranty. You know, how do we know that lifetime? What is that lifetime? You know, is it 5 years, 10 years? When the average consumer gets a car, 2.5 years. So I look at these companies, and you know, I see a company like CarPro, Seacort's Finest with Corey, another good guy, Corey. You know, I love talking to Corey. I really do. He's a fun guy to talk to. You know, I see them they promote the 3 years. You know. And I've seen Seacort's Finest go over than that. I guess because of philosophy, that's what Corey does. I'm not sure, but over deliver and under promise.
Totally.
So you see this with a 2 to 3 year coating, and I literally have a customer's car, you know, Seacort's Finest on a 3.5, 4 years now, roughly. And it's still beating this. Customer still loves it back when it was a Finest installer. So. You know, I think what scares me about coatings is it's still a little uncertain. Mm-hmm. They're proving that they work. We know that they work, but at the end of the day, I think the biggest issue is in all the coating world is the lack of education either between the company and the installer, or the installer and the consumer, or a little bit of both.
Nailed it.
You know.
Yep.
I think that that's the biggest issue in the market right now. I think the biggest issue is the lack of education, a little bit. And it's there. Maybe it's not delivered properly, but the education's there. But when I don't want to say this without, let me phrase it. So I see guys lying. You know, some guys are suggesting the same coating. it'll last 5 years. Some guys are saying 2 years. Some guys are saying, no, you need to wait a day before putting another coating on top of this coating. And then the next guy will say, no, I can do it in 45 minutes. So there's a lot of uncertainty with coatings. But I'm also saying that I'm a firm believer in as well, for the consumer and for the detailer and for the company who owns that brand or manufactures a coating. And I say this because one of the things I really, really like about coatings is it allows an installer to truly get paid for his time and effort. Fine, and when I go back 5, 6, 7 years, you look at detailing. It was very hard to charge a premium price for a detail unless you had a name and brand established. Now I see guys who are on the internet that don't know how to build a rotary, that don't know how to clean an interior. They're asking basic questions, simple questions, how to wash or degrease a car, but then they're bragging because they charge $75 an hour to detail a car. And to me, it's completely wrong, but at the end of the day, how did they get there? Well, they get there because they bought a this to change the publishing world. They learned how to correct paint, and somehow they got associated with a brand of coatings. And now they're learning to polish paint, which took me 10 years to master.
Right.
In my younger days, they're learning in a year, from reading. And then throw them a coating and say, hey, listen, now you know how to polish paint, we're going to give you a coating to try. If they're good with the camera and they're good with marketing, their business can explode.
Right.
But that scares me because anybody can do that. Anybody can at the end of the day. But again, there's not much knowledge involved.
And I actually think that's a short-term. Yeah, I actually think that's a short-term play because even though it seems like there's so much upside, as you mentioned, there's actually so much downside with. It's great that they're good with camera and marketing, but when it comes down to running a business, if a customer comes back because they have a complaint about the coating or they were oversold on the coating, which I find happening a lot, people are actually oversold on the properties of a coating instead of just being honest with the customer, and that's I see a guy that just comes up and starts doing this correction and coding stuff, and that's it. It's actually, I think it's dangerous because he's so limited in his knowledge of, like, I call it real world detailing of, like, how do you clean an interior and make it look presentable to the customer? Like, I find that aspect of detailing so much more interesting than, like, how they sold this guy on a huge coating job. I don't know how you feel on that, but that's kind of my stance.
No, I do. And it's, again, it boils back to, I think on the last conversation, we started a little trend here of the internet detailer.
Yep.
I conversation, there's a guy, I'm going to name Scott Nichols, Arizona.
What was the name again? The phone cut out. Say it again.
Scott Nichols.
Oh, yeah.
From Arizona.
Yep.
Yeah.
Distinct
a lot of people
detail.
know Scott. Scott's quiet. Yeah. He's very quiet, humble guy. He's got such a niche in a very incredible market. With 10 Concord cars apart and spending ridiculous hours. Absolutely crazy. But when I look at Scott, there's one thing I've noticed. I've never seen Scott say, hey, guess what? I'm using this coating. Scott's a traditional guy, still making it, doing very well for him, very busy, and not really selling things. And we had this conversation, and at the end of the day, it's like, there's room for anybody to grow. The one thing that I like about coatings is, again, it allows everybody to make money. At the end of the day, it also allows the wrong people to make money. And those are those internet detailers who still have more to learn before they do it. And if you look at these coating companies, I'm from a small town in Mannheim where I grew up. My one business is there. Town of 4,000 people. We have those large adult auction, but that whole I have a vinyl guy there. Okay, and it's what he does. He does vinyl and clear bra. Okay. And he has been approved to sell 2 coatings. So he's not a detailer, but yet he's slapping on coatings, and charging a premium for it. And I'm thankful for that because, at the end of the day, it makes my job easier when a customer comes to me and says, hey, I was over at this shop and they were trying to sell me coating, but, they don't really detail the car. At least you detail it and you have a name and you back it up. I wish coating companies would break down one day and just say, listen, at the end of the day, you need to be solid with your game. We don't want a coating applied in your house. And, I don't mean that to anybody who's starting a detailing company in their house, because I've done that. But, have a legit business, have a store, have insurance. Be verifiable, and don't just hand these coatings out to, like we both install the same coating and he's 2 miles away. Right. Why would you do that for your brand? There's only one reason. Your brand's greedy. You're just trying to suck up money. There's got to be territories. There's got to be consequences if you don't do that. If these detailers aren't living up to it, why is one detailer selling a coating for $500 and the next guy is selling for $1,400?
Yes.
People see demographics. People say, oh well, I'm in Amish country, Pennsylvania, and the next guy's down in Ohio. Yeah, me in Amish country, Pennsylvania, I can still sell coating for X amount of dollars. Right. They just get so hoarded out now because people realize they can make money, and now, you're ruining the value of the brand. Whatever brand it may be, the coating, you're ruining that value, and also hurting your stuff by holding out that product. It's like if I go into Home Depot and I want to buy a tractor, that tractor's $800. You know what I mean? Right. To cut my grass. But now if I go to Lowe's, that exact tractor, guess what? It's going to be $800. Right. These people, real business people, are sacrificing money and ruining their brand to build a business. It's okay to give one freebie here and there to a family member, a friend, or, to that one guy who is associated with all the cars and you want to get your name out there. Sure. You do it for free. And the problem is, detailers don't make a lot of money. We all know that. Right. There are some out there that make a ton of money, and then there's some, but in general, most detailers, they're spending tomorrow's money yesterday. Yep. And that's a problem. That's a problem because that's where the active inspiration gets in. That's where you start pouring out cells and these products, these coatings, and it's really that simple, And I think that's a major issue in our industry. Yep. The IDA, has, they've taken leaps and bounds to really educate detailers, to really do a lot of stuff. To be honest, years ago, I was kind of against the IDA because I just thought it was ridiculous. Now, I think the IDA has a very strong presence. I think they're doing phenomenal. I think that, their willpower and their positivity, within the entire detailing market is huge. I wish more guys, including myself, I need to jump on board with them. But I wish more guys would jump on and create unity amongst everybody. Eventually the bad apples will be out of the industry, but you can't, so hard to do that, to create that unity, because everybody's out for themselves, and, like I have local competitors with me. I used to be the only real detailer around. I called the real detailer in my area was somebody who didn't just knock cars out the door, somebody who actually cared and did what they were supposed to do. I was the only guy around years ago. Now, I have, within 25 miles, I have 7 detailers that I have to compete against. And people always ask, what do you do with this? I don't care what they're doing. The moment I'm focused on their business, I'm not worried about my business. Yep. I've already lost that battle. Yep. But at the same time, a lot of those guys have been the trainings that I've done. They call me for advice on products and things like that. And I still try to help them, to create unity amongst stuff, So, I don't want the guy down the street selling a coating for $600 all the time when I'm trying to sell it for $1,200. he's an idiot. If he'd bump his prices up to $1,200, we could both sell. Then it's fair game.
Exactly.
But that's the problem. When you look back on it, coating companies, all of them, but some of them, they're just about the bottom dollar. I can't blame them because it's a business.
Sure.
But I have a feeling those who are about the bottom dollar will eventually not be as big as they are, or it won't make any gains. And I think that's the biggest issue. I really think, at the end of the day, the money involved with coatings is the biggest issue within the coatings. Outside of the uncertainty that we were talking about previously, I think people are a little too far-fetched these days, and they need to come to a realization, hey, this ain't the end of the be-all. Let's whore this product out. There's a reason why not everybody can buy a Ferrari. Keep it that way.
Yep.
There's a reason why Porsche has, if you're looking at a Porsche and, you don't have the money for a brand new GT RS or whatever, a new 19, well, guess what? Porsche got a Porsche payment for you. Drive that and work your way up the ladder. But now all of a sudden you're the same thing. You have these coating companies who aren't keeping that tradition, that excellence that people strive for. I think Corey has done that with Quartz fantastically. Quartz is it's a good brand, it's a good coating, but I think Corey's business model is a successful business model that's going to be around forever. There's no doubt about it. Traditionally, I'd love this coating come out and say, you know what? Here's a 3-year coating. That's all it is. 3-year coating. It's going to protect your paint. It's going to last. It's going to shine. But it's going to lose its hydrophobic properties in about a year and a half. We all know that. Why do you think they come out with a topper to put on top of the coating? It's to keep the hydrophobic properties. That's all it is.
Yep.
But it's one of those things, I look at all these companies and I just think to myself, maybe I need to come out with a coating company. Maybe I need to do it, and kind of like a Donald Trump version. Make America great again by listening to the people.
Right.
And being that guy. But I don't know. I wouldn't know if I'd put those heads or not. I know. It seems no matter what, you're always going to have people complaining and bitching and arguing, and then instead of Barry Theal being a controversial name, Barry Theal will be a coating company with a controversial name as well. It creates more drama. I don't stay away from that these days.
I think you got the best of it. You sold your company to a coating company. So in a way, you got your coatings.
Yeah. But it's just, it's such a market, man. It's, at the end of the day, it's really a dick swinging contest out there.
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. Which is really common in our industry anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's who's got the biggest buffer, who's got the best coating,
right?
Who can remove swirls. I see these pictures of these 50/50s with swirls, and it's like, good job. That's what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean? Impress me with something besides a piece of tape that says, hey, it's swirls.
You just wonder how doctored those are too. I wonder, because I know what it takes to do a 50/50, and I'm like, man, I wonder how much doctoring went into this photo. Because honestly, you could do not much to one side of the paint and doctor your exterior or your other surroundings and get the paint to look just as good, in a 50/50. So I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right, and I'm not. That's another touchy subject I don't want to bring up. I mean, that's
we could spend a whole hour on that.
An hour.
Yeah, that'll be our third podcast.
You do the reflection shots. Okay, yeah, that's great. You don't know nothing. You really know what you're looking for,
right?
All you see is, hey, look at this. This is a great reflection. Look, you can see things.
Half the time, I'm confused.
Yeah, but you could clean a car, wash a car, and that's it. And say, look at the reflection.
Right.
Exactly. Never get that shot. Again, and it's simple. I'll give guys a little hint. If you put your LED light, directly on a car, you're going to see everything. If you tilt that LED up about 20%, that paint looks flawless, you know?
Right.
So for those out there who are listening that want to cheat, that's how you do it. You know, we as real detailers know that, see that, and we read right through it. So
Totally.
if you're listening, that's what you want to do. Don't do it because you look like an idiot. But again, it boils. You know, when you break down these coatings and you ask the positive and the negative, I really would love to see coating companies more strict with who to choose to give these coatings to, and being a little more realistic with certain things. And that's really, I don't know how to say it, other than that I'm a firm believer coatings will be around forever. Like, until there's new technology or something else, coatings have really put a staple in our industry. I can't remember the last time I seen a guy bragging about he bought, $2,500 wax,
Right.
or bragging about enamel ties. That era changed. It's gone out the window. There's a lot of good waxes out there, but you don't really see people doing that anymore. 5 to 6 years ago, oh, look, I got Swiss Wax Crystal Rock, or I got Zymo Vintage Royale. You used to see that, and now you don't see that anymore. Maybe the industry is evolving, things are changing, but I really don't. I think waxes are outdated. Sealants are still nice, obviously, and even waxes, but they're outdated. They should only be used for certain things, then into these coatings, and they're here to stay until something better comes along. And pretty soon I have a feeling that something better is going to be, something that even a detailer won't need to do anyway. You look at the car industry, a car door gets a scratch on, pretty soon you're going to be able to unbolt that skin and go to the dealership and say, okay, do you know what? I scratched the left door here on my car. So I have to replace that panel. Pretty soon you're going to be able to go to a delership and just add that panel. It's like you're buying a tire. And you're going to put that panel on the car and you're good to go. Yeah. I have a feeling that's the way it's going to go. Almost like a piece of vinyl or something, over top. I mean, it's tough to really project what these car manufacturers are doing, but when you look at the trends and you look at the fiberglass and the plastic, the aluminum and things like that are being used today, it's just a matter of time before you're able to get your car. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling, and be able to unbolt a car. And it really worries me. What do detailers do next? And if these coatings are legit, when does the factory start putting them on? Right.
Yes.
Why don't that's another question. At a factory level, these coatings are easy to put on. They're building all these things. Let's, while the paint is there, let's put a coating on it. Why the paint hasn't been scratched or marked before the truck and transport and gets nicked off and heads sealer and gets wiped down wide and road. Why not a coating on there at the factory level? Now, and when you think about that, you have to wonder why they don't.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, we're buying these coats at whatever price,
right?
Whether it's $80, $100, or $200. Okay, which is chump change in the OEM market, by the way.
Right.
Now, if they were to order this coating on a much lower scale, one manufacturer, like a company like GM, for example, they say, "Hey, we're going to coat every car." They're immediately bigger than coating company,
right?
Instantly with the dying car. So why are they going to a manufacturer of coatings, who I won't say? I mean, I know most of them, but I won't say their names, obviously. But why don't they go to manufacturer X and say, okay, we want to buy your coating by 55-gallon drums or 250-gallon totes, and we're going to coat our cars with it at a factory level. Mm-hmm. Why is that not being done yet? That's the question most people should really want to realize. Why isn't it?
Well, that's a great question. And that's super scary to think of the detailer who has based his whole business off of coatings. Because he can be X'd out so easily. It's a good point.
But being X'd out, okay, why haven't they done it? These manufacturers know about these coatings. I mean, Xylon's been around for years. Simonides has been around for years. Is it, the dealership makes a ton of money off the product because of the dealership warranty. We all know that, but it's a sense of being selling to a customer. I just bought a new car and they asked me, do you want your car coated and protected? Because they had to. And where I bought it, these people know me very well, and they knew that I install coatings. I'm like, I just looked at the smile. I was like, it's part of the business. But the business, why aren't these things a part of the business at a fair level? Or is it because expense? No, it's not because of money. You know what I mean? It would cost them $100. They'll mark up a car $300, and they'll make $200 cars for every car that goes out the factory. What is it? Ain't for GM, Chrysler, all mass-produced companies bring these cars. It's not much of a headache. All they got to do is add 2 guys on or 3 guys on at the end of the assembly line, or find a way to put it into a machine, spray it on, and wipe it off. But why aren't they doing this? Is what concerns me. And I think when I think about this is they're uncertain as well. What thing has there been? Right. I've heard of wind tunnel tests. I've heard of rock prevention tests. I've heard of, whatever test in the world you could think of from any company. All it's tested, it's approved, whatever, What's the actual factual data?
Right.
There is data. I want to see that data. I want to see those tests. Where are they? And as a detailer, I've looked. I've looked. When you buy a machine, okay, an ISO certification and a world low certification, okay, that a machine company will have. That means that, hey, do you know what? This machine's been dropped from 50 feet. This machine's been spun for, whatever, 1,000 hours on a machine, whatever the case may be. It's certified. It does. You can actually go to the company's website and find that actual data. Mm-hmm. Where is the actual data in coatings? It's uncertain. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's what scares me. Why are we as detailers applying this stuff? Well, it makes us money. Mm-hmm. It's good on a car, and the customer's paying for it because of the work. But where's the data to back that up? Where is the hard evidence that says, okay, do you know what? We've ran our coating through an extreme, I don't even know.
Right.
We've poured water over the coating. I had a machine that just recycled water, and it kept pouring water over this coating for 3 years.
Right.
Okay. Where's that evidence? Where's the evidence that it's going to actually protect against a bird drop? A bird craps on the car, drops, and it sits there. You see that gas in that. It needs to get cleared. Where's the evidence to back it up? And I think that's kind of another uncertainty that I don't have.
All right. So with all that said about coatings, and I know we've had some difficulties, especially on my end, but what would, because we don't have definitive evidence that these coatings are necessarily bad. I mean, we have experiences, and detailers have their personal experiences, and I think we would both agree that coatings are very beneficial and very helpful on multiple different levels. But what advice would you give to the person currently installing coatings or looking at installing coatings? Like, what do we need to be aware of, or what do we need to be careful of?
Well, I think the first thing is, if I was in that position where I was looking for a coating company, I would explore all options, not just one, because it's, at the time it's the flavor of the week, right, and I want to be a part of something. I would look at the demographics of my customers and look at what's in my backyard. Are my customers daily drivers? Are my customers collectors? distributors are, and so on and so on. First, you got to find your market. Find your market first, and then explore what will fit into that market. And don't give a crap if, some detailer says, hey, listen, I had a bad problem with whatever this company was. You shouldn't use them. Don't give a crap about that. Do your own research. Do your own, find your own evidence at the end of the day. The moment you start listening to the other detailers, you're not really, especially on product recommendation. There's so many great products out there. So many good compound polishes. All the coatings now are really good. They all work. It's just, there's few uncertainties that we originally talked about. But at the end of the day, you've got to do your own research on what is best for your company. Not what's best for the coating, not what's best for the manufacturer of the coating or whatever. It's what's going to be best for your company that will allow you to make money, but yet also be best for your customer. Other than that, I would just tell people to stay away from the hype, the bullshit, all that crap, and just do your own research. As far as the coatings are, at the end of the day, they're pretty much the same. You up a few ingredients or down a few ingredients, you get more longevity, less longevity. Realistically, the coatings that are more durable, you could look at are going to be harder to apply. The coatings that are less durable are going to be easier to apply. And that all breaks down to the amount of ingredients that are in them. Do these coatings live up to what they're supposed to do? Are they all clear? Believe it or not, some coatings actually dry yellow, and harden to a yellow structure. That's another thing you want to look out for. Are they consistent with the manufacturing of the coatings? And again, I've gotten all that from my own research.
Right.
And it's, one of those things, I'm not going to go out there and say, well, product X turned yellow and product B turned white and clear or whatever. That was all knowledge that I did for myself from my understanding and not for anybody else's knowledge. I'm not going to rock the boat with that company. I know a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys I respect. I really do. I respect them wholeheartedly for the things that they've done to our business and how they've given back to our business. The entire industry as a whole is huge. And then I've had coatings that were really good, but just did not work for me. Not as far as performance, but for my customers. It's just it's not the right selection. So I think that would be my biggest thing for any new guy coming into this industry. Do your homework and shop around. Don't be afraid to say, okay, well, my competition's using this product and he's successful, so I want to use it. 9 times out of 10, he was successful before he started using that coating. That coating is just something that he branded himself with. Find out why they're successful. Find out, why guys have had success. Not the instant, hey, look at me, overnight I became a detailer and, I know what I'm talking about because I've read a couple things and I'm just passing on knowledge, shared knowledge that I thought was my knowledge. Don't look at them guys. Look at the guys who have 20 years, 10 years, 30 years. The guys in this industry like Jason Rose who constantly give everything back to the industry, or Kevin Brown who shares his knowledge. Guys like that who share their knowledge are usually the successful ones that have been around for 15, 20, 30 years. Those are the guys you want to look up to, not the guy that is, starting his own internet business or internet detailing business, as I call it, who's been detailing for 2 years. Stay away from them guys.
Right.
They're probably just as lost and clueless in this industry as you are. Well, not you personal, but as the person who's listening to I'm talking to, I guess. But just at the end of the day, just do your own homework and your own research. Find out what's best for you and your company. Don't think that a coding company is going to make you $1 million because they have good marketing or good following or whatever. It's like buying a pair of Nike shoes and thinking you're going to run a 4.440.
Right.
It's not going to happen with practice and knowledge and experience,
Right.
And I wish it would happen. I wish I could go buy a pair of Nikes and run a 4.440 right now, but that's not going to happen being my size. I'm going to buy a pair of Nikes and run a 10.440, So, and it's not what people promise. It's do your own research, your own.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice.
Just do your own homework.
Exactly. No, that's a great piece of advice. I love that. If people want to connect with you and find you and watch for these ideas that you talked about and mentioned, that I have no idea what they are, but for the ideas that you may have coming down the pipe, how can people find you?
Man, over the years, do you know what? They can find me by email me at barry@presidentialdetails.com. Obviously, there's Facebook Messenger, but if you're listening to this and you want to send me a Facebook Messenger message, don't be mad if I don't get back to you right away. You're better off just personally calling me. Just be forewarned that I can talk shop forever. But if that's the case, I'll make it here. My number. It's 717-875-8686. That's the best way I tell people to get a hold of me, because I hate I'm not the smartest man on the earth. I'm dyslexic. I struggle to put my thoughts into paper, or these days I struggle to put my thoughts into a text message. Sometimes it don't come out. I want it to come out. You're just better off calling me, if that makes sense.
It does. And I appreciate you giving out your number. And I appreciate you coming back on.
No worries, Jimbo. Listen, anytime, man. I look forward to it. And I actually became a fan of yours and started listening to podcasts. And, I think what you're doing is a very huge thing for the entire detailing community, I think you're sharing the wealth and the knowledge of other detailers, which is huge. And what's even more important is I don't think you're really in it for yourself. And you're in it to help the industry. And I appreciate that, man.
I know. That was a little frustrating with the connection that we had. Again, we tried to figure it out multiple times, but we just couldn't. Anyway, I hope you made it through the whole episode because, again, I feel like the content was there. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I will see you next week in episode 262. And if you want to hear from me before that, again, you could head to autodetailingpodcast.com, left sidebar, get your email plugged in there. I promise I won't spam you and you won't be getting a bunch of junk. It's only when I have great guests on or whenever I feel inclined to do so. But it'll be a better way for us to communicate. Or you can always, I'm at Auto Detailing Podcast or at Jimbo Balaam across any platform over the internet. And I'm working on getting, if you just Google Jimbo in Google, that I populate. So it works on my computer and my dad's computer and my family's computer, but I don't think it works globally. So help me work on that. Just Google Jimbo, see if I pop up. All right, guys. See you on the next episode.